This is simply but one of the many signs that the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz campaign is in deep, deep trouble. Breaking decades of tradition, the Washington Post past Friday decided not to endorse a candidate, and by their decision to do that, tacitly admitted that the Democrat ticket is just not worth putting our already beleaguered reputation on the line for. That's bad. That is really bad, and internal sources leaked that there were quite a few upset people working down there at WAPO. I said WAPO, a Freudian slip, I guess. But there was, I guess, some resignations tendered. There was probably some boxes of hair dye and some kitty litter getting thrown around in the lunchroom. But I would imagine it wasn't exactly the happiest place on earth. And at this point in time, Jeff Bezos, well, he knows a thing or two about bombs, especially with the Rings of Power happening earlier this year. Also thinking that, yeah, man, we don't need to affix ourselves to any more of a car crash. We'll go ahead and sit this one out and, really try to ramp everything up for 2028, because the Lord knows that's what both parties are going to have to focus on into the future. But anyways, Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos defends paper's decision to not back a 2024 candidate, claims presidential endorsements creates a perception of bias. Bro, you bought one of the most politically active papers. I mean, does a little thing called Watergate ring a bell there, Bezos? Bruh, your paper, the paper that you bought, all of that influence that you thought you would get from the paper of record, democracy dies in darkness, create a perception of bias? Bro, you ran one of the most popular presidents of all time out of town in Richard Nixon back in the cut, and that's a scandal that we might have to go over in much more deeper consideration in the future. But I digress. Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos defended the publication's decision not to back a presidential candidate ahead of the November 5th election, insisting political endorsements create a perception of bias. That's exactly what they do, and that's what they're supposed to do. Don't get it twisted. It's like, at this point in time, I don't really think, and especially in the era of Trump politics, I don't really think an endorsement is going to help or hamper anybody, really. Like, if you're going to be voting for Kamala, you already have brain damage, and you don't need to tell me, and you hopefully can remember to take all of those, fixed ballots and stuff them in your helmet before you hop into the booth. But at the same time, when Zachary Levi came out and said his stuff about Trump that he did, or Hulk Hogan taking the stage at Madison Square Garden or at the RNC and ripping off his shirt, I don't think it swayed anybody. I think the only thing that might have, and still, maybe no more than a handful of people, but Trump on the Rogan show, that's about it. That's about the only thing that could have potentially moved somebody. But that was being simply a platform, not a publication. And yeah, the New York Post endorsed Trump, but they also did in 2020. The Washington Post also backed Joe Biden and every other Democratic candidate for how long at this point in time? Like, at least during my entire cognizant life, I couldn't imagine them ever not backing a Democrat. So when you've got that long of a verifiable track record, your inaction says more than your actions ever could, which is kind of hilarious. But yes, Bezos broke his silence on the matter in an op-ed published by by Washington Post Monday night, arguing his newspaper ending its long-running practice of endorsing a candidate for the White House is a principled decision, and it's a right one. Yeah, exactly. Kamala, it's not your time, okay? You're being used as a sacrificial lamb, so you guys don't run over any of your other blue chip prospects that you have sitting on the bench, like Gretchen Whitmer, or Gavin Newsom, or somebody else we'll get to in very short order. Presidential endorsements do not tip the scales of an election, and that's something that I agree with on wannabe Dr. Evil. No undecided voters in Pennsylvania are going to say, I'm going with newspaper A's endorsement. None. No, he's right. Also an ass. What presidential endorsements actually do is create a perception of bias, a perception of non-independence. But yes, the paper's decision not to endorse a 2024 election marks the first time in in 36 years, it won't issue an endorsement. Yeah, man, so what? That was HW? I guess that election right there? It's crazy to think about. And as everybody, when you heard that news, your big takeaway was everybody is hopping off the Kamala Tim Walz bandwagon. Because what actually is there to get behind? Okay, say if you're like a traditional, like you're a default Democrat or something like that, you generally think that those ideas as they're presented are more amenable to your own deeply held principles. That's fine, okay? In a vacuum, being a Democrat is a perfectly tenable position, okay? As somebody who has been a lifelong conservative for the moment that I've been politically aware, long before I was even of voting age, I've had to stray away from my conservative representation time and time again. I can recall, in a couple of federal elections, I've had to vote PPC because the Conservative Party of Canada, or whatever they were calling the Conservative Party of Alberta, wasn't representing what I believed was the best for the province or for the country. So I've had to vote off ticket or outside of the confines of the party multiple times over. Very rarely has there been a politician that has ever inspired me enough to go ahead and cross the aisle and vote for a party. It's mostly been, yes, party first. That's a big problem of Canadian politics, but that'll be another issue for potentially another time, because we'll eventually have the opportunity to get rid of Justin Trudeau. But now we're just focused squarely on the downfall of the Democrats and the final and third ascendance of Trump, because you got another story about Tim Walz and how he is firmly entrenching himself as being the worst VP pick of all time. Like, bro, you have stolen valor. You have stolen valor when it comes to your military service. You lied about being in Tiananmen Square. You've done so many stupid things as governor of Minnesota. And now we're fucking on a CCP spy's daughter in the 80s? Like, is there anything scummy that this guy hasn't done? Like, bro, what the hell? Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz. Okay, just to sidetrack for a second before we get back to this story. Honestly, I cannot, okay? Like, I could understand why Kamala Harris was installed as the vice president for Joe Biden. She's a diversity hire of the highest order. I can understand that in the confines of the Democrats. But when it comes to selecting Tim Walz, I don't get this one at all. Okay, Minnesota, firmly blue state. You don't need to win anybody over there. It's not like his track record is fantastic. It's not like he has a national presence. He's not inspiring at all. There was no reason to pick this guy. You had Josh Shapiro out there in Pennsylvania. That could have, I guess, potentially bit you in the ass after, Trump eventually got bit in the ear in Pennsylvania. Could have been a little bit closer, and you could definitely use Pennsylvania. You're not in any real danger of losing Minnesota, and even if you did, it's a handful of electoral votes. Pennsylvania, so much smarter. You could have went with the all-bitch ticket with Gretchen Whitmer, but you didn't. You could have went with Newsom. You didn't. You decided to pick the old crusty white man in order to shame white guys to vote for you, to run with that cringy white dudes for Harris campaign that Trump destroyed at the Al Smith dinner. Like, it really, okay, and I'm trying to be as fair and objective as possible. Tim Walz is the worst vice presidential pick ever. Dan Quayle's dumbass looks better in comparison. Like, this one, it boggles the mind. But anyways, okay. Vice presidential nominee Tim Walz had a love affair with the daughter of a Chinese Communist Party official during his teaching stint in Foshan. That was so stormy, it drove her to the brink of self-deletion. Jenna Wang, 59, hey Wang, the Post in a phone interview on Monday that she had fallen head over heels for the now Minnesota governor when he was a young high school English instructor in Foshan, Guangdong province in China. Okay. Hey, not bad, I guess. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Wang expected the passionate 89 affair to end in a proposal, but instead it resulted in a breakup that made her consider, self-deletion. Oh, I can't get out of China. The white man lied to me. Or it's like, okay, now you're just trying to make this into a Me Too thing. It's like, now you're going to make me try to stick up for Tim Walz here. And okay, he came in and he pumped and dumped you. Don't try to turn me on Tim Walz here for a second. Okay, let's stay on target on this one. And just once again, just point out how cringy of an individual he is, because I'll look at the situations different than some other people here. It's not going to ingratiate him to me at all whatsoever. It's just fun to make jokes, but the way that they're pandering to people out there, the Harris Walz ticket, like, bro, setting up a Fortnite map, like, what kind of cringe shit is this, bro? Okay, like, Fortnite is already bad enough to begin with, and if you're trying to get the gamer vote, okay, with the Fortnite map Freedom Town USA, which I guess you're not taking a look at any of her policies that she, quite frankly, stole from Trump, is the Democrats push to reach gamers and young voters. What is your average? like, okay, I know for sure, like, the meme is that, only kids play Fortnite, kids and people that are generally retarded. Are you gonna win over on that? Like, okay, you do the goofy shit of doing a Fortnite map where it's like, okay, cool, I guess that's interesting that Washington has such a close connection with Epic Games, who also has a minority owner of the CCP. Funny how all of that stuff circles back around. And then recently also had a Tim Walz rally broadcast while somebody was playing World of Warcraft. And then over this past weekend, while Trump was holding that massive Madison Square Garden MAGA rally, and then also he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, Tim Walz was shacking up with AOC, and they were playing video games. Like, this is some of the most hello fellow kids shit I have seen in my fucking life. Coach Tim Walz, which I guess that's a little bit more of a catchy nickname than Tampon Tim, but okay, gets mocked for fumbling simple football term. Yeah, because they were playing Madden. Because, yeah, okay, it's weird that you're trying to get the gamer demographic by going after WoW guys 20 years after that game was the most popular thing since crack cocaine, or sibling marriage in Minnesota. Shout out Elon Omar. But then you go to Fortnite trying to get the underage vote, which, I thought that was the other side of the coin when it comes to otherwise inaccessible Democrat voting base. I would think, if you were going to be playing a video game that was more analogous to said group that you were trying to covet, you'd be playing Ghosts and Goblins, Medieval, another game with a necromancer. I digress. But trying to get the dude bros who were playing Madden, I mean, Trump was just recently at a massive Pittsburgh Steelers game, and he was working the crowd, and it was such a rousing success that Newsweek had to come out and fact check an AI picture of Trump wearing a Steelers jersey with a 47 on it. Like, it's a little bit of a different group, but then, yeah, for him to just simply say, you don't run the pick six. Wait, what? He's going to run a pick six. Yeah, okay. Minnesota governor and Democratic vice presidential candidate live streamed himself playing video games. Yeah, I've been a gamer since I put the Pong online. I wish I was making that quote up. In an appeal to, younger male voters, with AOC, and she's got a face cam, not a chest cam. Not exactly going to win over younger male voters if you know your demographic, and hell, if you're over there on Twitch, I mean, AOC, know the space. Only be mocked for misusing a common football term. Oh, don't worry, that wouldn't be the only time that they were mocked. Walz, a former defensive coordinator at Mankato West High School, tweeted afterwards that the far-left Bronx and Queens representative could run a mean pick six. Holy shit, bro. Okay, referring to an interception returned for a touchdown in a Madden video game series. Yeah, you run a mean pick six. You got the thing, I like the Vikings. Oh, I wonder how the Purple People Eaters are going to... I wonder how they're going to play this year. Probably regaling her and reminisce about Fran Tarkenton days. Like, bruh, you're not appealing to anybody. Should have been for every point you score, she takes off a layer of clothing. That might have actually appealed to somebody, but if the best jabs that you get are from AOC, which wasn't really that great anyways, but AOC mocks Trump with McDonald's E. coli conspiracy as she games with Tim Walz. Yeah, because they played Madden and Crazy Taxi. It's like, I liked Crazy Taxi too back in the early 2000s, and I know, but they don't, that Sega's going to be trying to do a updated online reboot of Crazy Taxi. That's not coming out for a couple of years, but that's what's supposed to appeal. An old Dreamcast game. The Dreamcast just celebrated its 25th anniversary. 9/9/99 was when that shit dropped. By 9/9/2000s, Sega was going out of business, which is very funny. And again, maybe they're doing some little meta shit that's over there. Okay, maybe that's making a little bit more sense, because outside of maybe me making reference to this stuff, it appears that nobody was watching this. Okay, because you go over to the actual video, which they're doing gameplay clips like this is YouTube in 2011, and it's not exactly setting the world on fire. 125,000 views. Not exactly a winner there, Tim. He's not at all popular. Okay, and I think that this is more or less setting up AOC for bigger and better things as opposed to anything else, because like I said at the beginning, okay, Democrats don't exactly have the deepest of benches, okay, because every single one of their blue chip candidates, okay, Gavin Newsom, okay, all I need to do is just simply point to his track record in California and the fact that they've lost electoral votes because everybody's leaving the state. And then, by the next presidential election cycle, there could be multiple Hollywood studios leaving the state because he's run it so incredibly poorly. Gretchen Whitmer, In Michigan, there could actually be some favorable court appeals and some court rulings that'll eventually expose her and the FBI setting up her own kidnapping plot. Shout out Radix Verum, Christina over there, doing an exceptionally good documentary on that entire fiasco that happened in 2020. But who else? Who else is out there? There might be a couple of senators, but there's not going to be any holdovers. Bernie is eventually going to be too goddamn old to run. Elizabeth Warren, the exact same thing. Maybe shambling old Amy Klobuchar. Maybe. I want to keep it in the family out there in Minnesota. But AOC, next election cycle, she's going to be old enough to run for president, okay? I think she might have she could have got in under the wire this time around, but, Democrats realized that, in a fair, open, honest election, we ain't beating Trump this time around, and especially compounding all of the different issues that he's underwent this time around, they definitely aren't winning. They might by hook or by crook, but we'll be paying close attention to that in the interim between Tuesday and inauguration. I think in 2028, I think AOC takes a shot at it, or she at least launches an exploratory campaign. I think that's very likely because as the rest of the squad shrinks, right? Like Cori Bush lost her primary, same with Jamal Bowman, Rashida Tlaib, yeah. And nutcase up there in Michigan. Who knows what ultimately ends up happening there? The only one that's very likely to stick around long term is Ilhan Omar because she has an incredibly safe seat. If AOC doesn't take a shot at the presidency, she could end up entrenching herself like Nancy Pelosi, and Ilhan Omar sticks by her side and becomes the next Maxine Waters, and they end up running Congress in perpetuity forever and ever and ever. This is a building cycle for the Democrats. It's interesting to take a look at the other down ballot races, and there's a lot of interesting polling going on down there. We might take a look at that before the election comes around because that's very interesting as well. But as it sits right now, I mean, there's no way in hell cringy game streams or Trump works at McDonald's. And that's actually verified as opposed to your current presidential nominee. And there's an E. coli conspiracy. Oh my God. Yeah. McDonald's just had a big recall. Oh, I guess they just ended up brushing up too close to rotten Trump. Get it? But meanwhile, you have to get around crazy ass Tim Walz when he's out there streaming to 6 people. It's a disaster. It's a quantifiable, verifiable disaster. When Kamala's not too busy putting her and everybody else's feet in her mouth, Tim's out there being a cringe lord on Twitch. This should be a point of inflection for Democrats, but do you think they're going to take it this time around? I guess only time will tell. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.